Hi, everybody. Dr. Cersei here, just doing a brief sort of overview of research methodology and what we want to look for when we're assessing manuscripts. So, just some overarching questions, themes that kind of going to run through of all the slides that we have here when you're considering the research methodology and the article as a whole. Question one: are they filling a gap in the literature, or are they treading an old forest? The next one is like, just does the article overall, the research methodology, use the questions that they're trying to answer? Are they aligned with the mission and vision of the journal? And then the third one is, does the approach to collecting, analyzing, discussing data, does it answer the questions that they're trying to address? And that also speaks back to, does it align with the mission and vision of the journal? So getting into it, first thing we're going to look at always, the research problem, the objectives, that background. Do they know what they're talking about? Are they clear? Are they concise? Do they contextualize the issue that they're trying to address? Is it significant? Do they make a good argument for addressing this issue in the first place, particularly through the mission and vision of the journal that they to which they submitted? The other thing is, are the objectives, the hypotheses, are they clearly laid out? Are they logical? Are they clearly defined? The next thing is their approach. Do they have a study design that makes sense? If they're trying to like answer a public health question and how things are impacted in a community over time, if they do a cross-sectional survey, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and it's not going to answer their question. So again, type of design right off the bat. Also, do they make a good argument for the design that they have done? Is it justified? Is it something that's been done in the literature? Are they using a good theoretical lens? The other thing is, internal external validity. Are efforts made to balance the study's rigor with its generalizability? So that's going to be a little bit different too when it comes to a qualitative versus a quantitative study. Sampling on population, very important to consider. Who are the people being studied? Who is taking part in this intervention? Who is being interviewed for this qualitative study? So having that population clearly defined, who is being included, excluded, absolutely critical. Also, very important to understand how they're sampling. And I noted here, are they using convenience sampling with a purpose? Because convenience sampling, that's just a lazy approach to talk about sampling. We are always, as researchers, using purposive sampling. We are criterion based, always. Doesn't make any sense to just bring in people for no reason into a study. Sample size is also integral. Of course, in a quantitative study, you're going to want to often have, at least 30 people. That's a matter of looking into the discourse about what is a meaningful sample size. When it comes to qualitative studies, they can be much smaller because often those are for a much different purpose. They're hypothesis generating. You want to know a bit deeper about a phenomenon before moving forward, perhaps a different study. Data collection methods, this is very almost self-explanatory. You want to understand how they are getting the data. So you want to look at those instruments. Who designed those? Did they design them? Are they adapting a validated measure that's out there? What kind of procedure did they have in place? And that really dovetails into ethical considerations. If they are doing an RCT, we want to make sure that they have IRB approval. We want to know from whom they got this IRB approval. How did they do informed consent with their participants? If it's a photo voice study, who do the participants know where their pictures are going to be displayed? Can they produce documents that prove that they have gone through all of the ethical paperwork, if you will? So, very important part of this whole process. The other piece here is considering all their variables and measures. Are their key variables defined? Where are they getting these constructs? Are they drawing their constructs from theoretical lens, or are these something that's much more grounded? um, how are they being generated? The other thing is do they define what their independent and dependent variables are? If they don't, that's probably not going to work. Obviously, this is going to be a bit different for qualitative studies. And then there's always issues when it comes with measurement validity. Are the methods used to measure variables, are they valid? Are they reliable? Excuse me. And then are there any potential biases? Now, when it comes to biases, those aren't always a bad thing. Where there's an issue at play is when the researchers are not explicit. If you lay things out, if you make a justification, if you are completely transparent, then you can move forward. And then this brings us to data analysis itself. So we want to know about that approach. We've talked about before, how are they doing their analysis? Are they doing statistical tests? Are they doing qualitative coding? How are they organizing their data, for instance? Are they using SAS? Are they using Stata? If it's qualitative, are they using something like NVivo to organize all of their data? Are they clear that they know that NVivo is for organizing data, and that analysis and interpretation is something a bit different? Um, we also wanted to see the reporting of results. Always, do they have their table one? Um, do they report statistical significance? And if not, why not? Do they have confidence intervals reported, effect sizes? Also, want to make sure that they are very clear about the assumptions that they're using, and if there's any bias or confounding that they've controlled for, that they're explicit about, and if they're not, we have to raise a red flag with the authors. Then, of course, there's the interpretation of results. And that, of course, speaks to first alignment. Are the interpretations consistent? Contextualization. And that goes even back to that background, right? Are the results compared with previous studies, with the previous literature? Are they finding something different, something the same? Does it meet what they had expected with their hypotheses? The other thing that's very, very important is, are they clear with their strengths and limitations to this study? Not everything is going to be perfect. There's always going to be some limitations. What are the implications of the strengths and limitations for their overall study? The other thing, too, is making sure they don't try to overinterpret or write beyond what their data actually shows. Are they clear that there could be alternative explanations for for their results? And obviously, always, are they just doing too much? So, and of course, again, wanting to keep in mind these ethical and social considerations, particularly for a journal like BCPHR, where we are considering science, public health through the lenses of social justice and equity. Does the manuscript consider the broader ethical and societal impacts of the research findings? Do they address issues of diversity, equity, or inclusion? And of course, this really goes back to that science is not something that happens in a vacuum. Every researcher brings a lens to it, their own lived experience. And that's why we always require folks to talk about their positionality, and how that informs their approach to research right from the outset. And it really speaks to and really helps guide them in making sure that this is incorporated into the manuscript itself. So, and then that also with the research methodology, the presentation and writing, you know, considering that they have a logical structure, does it look like something that you recognize, as a research article? Do they have all the pieces in place, with the abstract, intro, methods, results, discussion, conclusion? Do they have the citations correctly there? And is everything that they are referencing, is it cited? The other thing with research methodology is making sure that what is cited is up to date, within the last 5 years, and that also speaks to clarity and the references. So a note here about reproducibility and transparency. Um, for BCPHR, we often are working with new and emerging researchers. So we don't run into this quite as often, but many journals are they really want folks to ensure that they are sharing data, that that make it clear how folks can get in touch with them to share data, and that they share any supplementary material, because they also want to make sure that the results that are being shared in the article can be reproduced. Now, this is going to be a little different for qualitative studies. Um, Qualitative studies are often about interpretation, and sometimes folks might come away with something a bit different from qualitative data, but that's for something a little bit um, for a different sort of discussion. But for qualitative studies, we're concerned about transportability a lot of times. So in qualitative research, are the methods being used? Are you able to replicate what they did in that sense? Also wanting to make sure that their protocols were being followed, and then are they being transparent? And that's been kind of a theme throughout this entire discussion. So BCPHR considerations, and this might be considerations for other journals as well. As I mentioned, we work with new and emerging researchers. Sometimes this is their first article. When we go through research methodology and we critique and we offer feedback, wanting it to be as helpful as possible so that they can move forward and use that feedback in their future work, even if we aren't able to accept the article. There also are some considerations to keep in mind around IRB when it comes to articles, research done in the US versus abroad, and also considering, are there any images that are being used in the piece? Do they have appropriate permissions associated with them? So when it comes to sources for research, sort of images and the like, I've put here some citations, places that you can recommend to folks. And with that, we are done. And I look forward to seeing everybody on Sunday.